All right, everybody, and welcome to this week's weekly wrap. Mirko, welcome to you on the screen. I'm Lucas. How you going, mate?
Going really well, Luke. What about you, mate?
And I'm doing wonderfully well. I'm actually glad it's Friday and looking forward to the weekend. Um, we've had house painting this week, so there is dust everywhere. So this weekend it looks like that's what we're doing. But looking forward to just having a nice quiet one. What about you, mate? Anything exciting?
Yeah, a bit the same. Been a pretty hectic sort of week on all fronts, so I'm looking forward to a bit of a downtime. Be nice.
Nice, nice, nice. All right, mate. Do you want to do us a favour and give us a quick market update in terms of what's happened this week on global markets and Australian markets?
Yep, I've just quickly updated the number, which has flicked us into the green for the week that it was an hour ago.
Whoa!
So yeah, looking at the Aussie market, started off with a minus 0.5%, and then we sort of slowly been clawing our way back, and we find ourselves up 0.09 for the week, so relatively flat from that perspective. Similar story out of the United States, a red start to the week, but hanging in there after 4 days of trading, and we find ourselves trading up 0.13 in the S&P 500 and up zero point 0.6 on the Nasdaq. The big thing that is on everyone's screens for tomorrow our time, overnight in the US, is basically the US inflation data will be released tonight. So the personal consumption expenditure, the PCE, and that is a big determinant around the inflation and therefore the US rate decision, which is expected to be in December. The markets are sort of expecting that rates will be cut in the US, and probably a reflection of a stronger Aussie dollar as a result. And I see the Aussie dollar clicked over 66 cents this morning. So it's probably an indication that they believe that the US may actually cut rates.
Yeah, we were having a chat to the NAB bankers yesterday in relation to FX, and their belief is that they see a lot of money sitting there waiting for the Aussie dollar to hit 67, where they do believe that there'll be quite a bit of profit taking at that moment in time. So, look, it's going to be interesting to see where the US dollar goes and how the Aussie dollar fares as a result.
Yeah, and look, if look, the US dollar's actually been under pressure on the assumption that rates will be cut, whether they get cut, in December, or whether it multiple cuts next year when Donald Trump gets his own chairman, if you like, of the Federal Reserve. And so the US dollar, as a result, has been under pressure. And amazing how, sort of things work as a result of that. We've been comfortable as an investment committee to look at a little bit more exposure to, say, emerging markets, which do not like a strong US dollar because they're a lot of those are commodity sort of economy. So, but we're quite comfortable that the pressure on the US dollar will remain, as we're starting to see now.
Absolutely, absolutely. But we have seen something interesting in the United States in the sense that whilst the job numbers claim or the jobless claims have fallen in the last month, which is always a good sign from that point of view, we're seeing a lot of small businesses starting to hemorrhage and they're filing for bankruptcy. So the messaging in the United States, a bit like the messaging here in Australia, is very mixed. You have parts of the economy doing well and other parts hemorrhaging. So it's a crazy set of numbers.
Oh, for sure. You got markets that are strong, some, massive valuations, massive cash flows being thrown out of some of these big mega cap stocks and in the tech sector, but at a small business level, which one would argue is probably the real world, is starting to struggle a bit. Is that a bit of a sign of what's to come for the person on the street in the US, and starting to question about how my lot is going at the right about now?
Yeah, true. And I think, look, and particularly in the United States, where a lot of employers, particularly at the small business levels, are paying for private health cover for their staff. Like that is one of the benefits. So I guess from that point of view, when you start to think about these sort of things, cost of living is a real big issue in the United States at this particular moment in time. So,
Huge.
premiums are rising, all that sort of stuff. So you can see where the pressures are building. So you kind of get it. Now, I want to talk to you about the Australian gas market. The Australian gas market has been broken, and we've argued this for many, many, many moons. But today, or we've just heard recently in the last couple of days, the Australian government is going to do something rather unique, and they're actually going to do their very own gas market intervention, where they're actually thinking about becoming a bulk gas buyer. So they're going to go out and buy all this gas and then on sell it to factories and producers in this country who are struggling under the weight of the cost of gas at this moment in time. Now, remember, Australia is one of the largest producers of gas in the world, or we have the largest gas reserves. We don't have that gas here because we've sold that all to foreign entities. They then export this gas and we then buy it back at inflated prices. What's your view on the government interfering? And tell me that this is not a smart idea.
Yeah, it sounds like the 80s when there was a West Australian gas crisis, and then we had to introduce all this gas reservation policy. And nothing really makes sense with the gas policies that we run. All the way from how much of it we export and then somehow manage to buy back here at no doubt inflated prices, down to Luke, you cannot have a gas hot plate, mate. That's not acceptable in Victoria. And it's like, that's cool, but then I may not have enough electricity to run the electric version of it. So not sure. I don't think that the policies are actually in sync or talking to each other at both the state, a federal level, and a national interest level, to be perfectly frank.
Yeah, and you look at the Nordic states and you look at the way they've handled their natural resources, and they've become incredibly wealthy as a result of those natural resources, whereas we in Australia, for whatever reason, we've given the keys away, and we've given it to companies where we don't actually get the benefit. We, as the custodians of all that, we don't even get the benefit of it, which makes absolutely no sense. And you can see why people are pulling their hair out, particularly in relation to energy policy in this country. Now, since we're talking about governments and we're talking about stupidity, it would be remiss of us not to talk about Minister Anika Wells. Now, Minister Anika Wells, just for a bit of context, she decided to fly to the United States with two of her members of her staff. And what they decided to do, they were going there to promote the social media ban. So the government has thought within its infinite wisdom, let's ban social media for children. And rather than get parents to manage this, the government wants to now manage this from that point of view. And in doing so, flying to the United States, she spent $100,000 on flights for the three of them, plus an extra $70,000 in event costs from that point of view. So 170 grand has been spent. Now, the minister won't explain the cost, nor will she actually explain why this trip actually occurred during the time of the 000 crisis in this country. Mate, this fails the pubs test on every conceivable angle. We've got the government saying we need to tighten our belts, and then we've got ministers who the only thing they're tightening are the business class seats that they're sitting in. Really?
Look, so, hang on, let me do the maths. $100,000. It was a 6-minute speech delivered at the UN. That's $16,666 a minute for arguably what could have been done as, when you go to an investment conference and they go, the keynote speaker is ex-Nobel Prize laureate in economics, and you know what? The guy pops up from his Harvard office on the screen, and it's still as good as a presentation as it was. I reckon we could have run with that, and it probably would have cost us. Let's throw in some cupcakes and a couple of takeaway coffees, probably $11, I reckon. But I think I did see one of the headlines and said, pub test fails, and the timing is just so poor on this as well. When genuinely. People are struggling under the weight of a cost of living crisis, and here we are making decisions like that. It's not limited to this particular politician. This happens broad brush. My biggest gripe with all this is that nothing to see here. Can you imagine if you did that in the real world, in the private world?
Absolutely. I think the other thing there too is if you actually look at the minister, when she was being questioned, and rightfully so, just the audacity and the refusal to answer the question, the whole notion of there's nothing to see here. And you're just sitting there going, would you have spent your own money? Now, the interesting thing is, whilst we were preparing for today's weekly wrap session, I thought, okay, I'm going to go in and I'm going to buy 3 first-class tickets to New York.
And hopefully I'm in one of those seats.
Well, I just thought I'm going to buy 3 first-class tickets. So I've gone to Skyscanner. And I've typed it in. I want 3 first-class tickets. we can fly to New York this weekend if we want to for under 60 grand, first class. So I don't know what she flew on, but 100 grand seems a bit top heavy, I would have thought.
There was a lot. There was some cool. There must have been some nice accommodation. They weren't sleeping under a bridge in New York, I can assure you.
Yes, I'm sure. Well, look, thank you for.
Well, while we're on that subject, anyway, if the government was deadly serious about costs and everything, I would love for somebody to just do a simple thing and sort of say, all these flights interstate between, Melbourne, Brisbane, Sydney, WA, the whole lot. How much are we paying for those airfares? And I can guarantee you that they're not sitting there using Skyscanner to try and work out, should I fly Virgin, Qantas, Jetstar? Where they would be spending an absolute bomb for a ridiculous amounts of money. And the amount of cost that could be saved will be there. But then again, it's not their money. It's the taxpayers' money. Who cares?
Yeah, and I think that's the problem, mate. That's the problem when no one is accountable. You end up with stuff like this, and it's just, for the poor bloke in the street who's struggling to make ends meet. You then look at this sort of largesse, and you kind of go like, really? And it like I said, I think your point is valid too, Mirko. This is not about the minister in question. If it wasn't her, it was somebody else, and previously it was other people. So this is a Liberal and Labor thing, and the beautiful thing about this is, the Liberal Party will come out and say, oh, it's outrageous, it's scandalous or whatever, and then it gets swept away under the carpet because they've done the exact same thing 3 years ago, and they'll do the exact same thing in 3 years' time. It's just all the same rubbish. Now, I want to have a quick check-in on Medicare. You remember when the Albanese government got re-elected, one of their big promises was around Medicare from that point of view, and it was about preserving Medicare, and they've had this spear campaign running on, you've got to vote for Labor because Labor will protect it, whereas the Liberal Party or the Coalition will get rid of Medicare from that point of view. Now, we've been having a bit of a look at all that kind of stuff, and one of the things that the Labor Party did promise was a big capital injection of $8.5 billion into Medicare. And so the first thing that you want to do is go, well, actually, have they delivered on that? And in actual fact, it has been budgeted for, it's actually been accounted for. And what we've seen is we've actually seen a big jump in bulk billing. So if we start to look at the wins and we start to sit back and go, well, some of the things that the government said they would do, that they have done. And we've actually seen that across Australia, there's actually been 4 million free GP visits as an increase, which is a great result for people, particularly the cost of living crisis and all that kind of stuff. You're kind of going, this is fantastic. However, when we start to break it down, these are the wins. I know you're across this as well. Where do you think the losses have been? What have the losses been in this regard, do you think?
Yeah, I think we're not dealing with the actual solution. We're very much on the surface here, and the reality is, for most people that are listening to this, you try and get into a doctor in the next day or two, it just can't happen, right? You just can't. You can't get in to see your local GP. There's so much pressure around that. And this stems from the amount of doctors that we actually have on board and the whole system of how we actually go about training, educating doctors, the limits that we put on. So as far as that's concerned, that is broken. Of course, the doctors that are existing have signed up for these new things because it means they get paid a little bit more. They still don't get paid enough for what they do and the important role they play in the community because, we've got some doctors on our books, and we see the sort of numbers that they generate. And in many instances, you sit back saying all that education, all those years spent, and the value that you add to the community, and that's all you generate. It's actually pretty poor, and it's no wonder that quite often they have to jump ship and look at other alternatives.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think the other thing there too, and this is something we've probably got to be mindful of, is that the hospitals are still log jammed, as in the public hospitals. So what we've got here is because there is such a blockage at NDIS level and such a blockage at the aged care level, a lot of hospital beds, particularly in the public system, are being utilised by people who need to transition out, but they've got nowhere to transition to. So if you do go to a public hospital, these things are still hemorrhaging. They're not moving. The thing that I also noticed, we had our youngest was in hospital there for a while, and so we were. And fortunately enough, we've got private health cover, so she was in one of the private hospitals from that perspective. The thing that caught me by surprise was the amount of empty beds inside of these private hospitals. So as you're walking around the wards, there might be room for 200 patients, yet there might only be 20 or 30 patients. And when you get a bit of probing and you ask the reasons why, from that point of view, it was really about a capability and staffing perspective. Not enough nurses, not enough doctors, not enough people to look after the whole system. So the system seems to be overloaded in one side and underloaded on the other side. And it would make sense that you kind of sit back and go, well, maybe the government should be talking to these private hospitals and go, well, can you catch the overflow? So if you remember what we did during COVID, when the public hospitals got inundated, the private hospitals stepped in. Maybe that's part of their social mantra moving forwards.
Social mantra.
You like that idea?
Again, I like you, Luke. You're the eternal optimist, mate. You always look at the bright side. I love it. Whereas I'm the cynic. I'm going, yeah, good, yeah, fat chance, yeah.
Well, since you're a cynic, that then takes us to Victoria, because this is my favourite topic, as you know. And there's two things I want to talk about Victoria today. There is the miracle, absolute miracle, that we've actually had a surprise revenue boost, and we actually announced a surplus, or an increased surplus, of $710 million, which is absolutely awesome that we've been able to generate more revenue and so on. And given all the taxes and given all the land taxes imposed, that's a little surprise.
What do we do? Do we pay down some debt, Luke? What do we do with that money?
Mate, no, we didn't, mate. No, we didn't. We actually spent everything that we received plus more. And what we've done is our net debt is still heading to $192 billion, which is effectively 25% of the economy. Mate, even when they have some fortune, we have a government that finds a way to blow it. It is bemusing, to say the least.
I am stuck for words, mate. Whenever I think about what is happening in Victoria, there was another announcement this morning around, how we've got that congestion tax in Victoria.
Yep.
That actually stays with the councils, which is at the end of the day not a bad thing. Keeps them funded so they can actually do some work around the streets and whatnot. Victorian government's keeping that. So come, I think it might be the next financial year, the Victorian government said we'll collect it, but we're keeping it now. We're not dishing it off to councils and whatnot, and I think it's to the tune of $20 million. Sort of just goes to show how we're going.
So we're actually now penny pinching from somebody else, trying to fix up problems that we've created. Is that what we're doing? Correct.
Nice.
Nice.
And a lot of that money does go to community services and social services within the those the Melbourne CBD and areas like Richmond, City of Yarra and stuff like that.
Yeah. So they're those council buses that we see driving around, picking up perhaps the elderly, taking them out on excursions, or helping those the ones with disabilities and the like. They're going to miss out again. Is the point?
Correct. And when you park your car in the wrong car park for a couple of hours, it might be $80 instead of $60. That's what will happen.
Yes, God bless Jacinta Allen. Okay, all right. Well, look. So that probably takes us to the second point. A while ago, Helen Silver was appointed by the Victorian government to go and do a good review of Victoria's finances. And part of her job was she was given the explicit task of, over the next 4 years, to find ways to cut $3 billion out of expenditures, because clearly we're spending way more than what we're earning, and this is a fundamental problem. Now, the report itself was delivered. It was handed over to the government, but the Victorian government, in their wonderful style, haven't shared that report. They've kept it to themselves. So we're only hypothesising what we think was on the report, and they've come up with their own version of what they think. So we know that Silver most likely recommended a 6% cut to the public service. A 5 to 6%, which effectively means anywhere between 5,500 to 6,000 roles would be removed. We also know that she also suggested that there would be a removal of senior specialists, anywhere between 5 to 1,000. And we know that she was talking about the merger of about 40 agencies and scrapping outdated programs and the like. So it was really about, actually, what we've got to do is we've got to trim as much as we can and go from there. What the government have agreed to do, and they've signed off this, and this was only yesterday, is they've agreed to cut jobs, but only 1,000. They've agreed to wind up 29 entities, not 40. And from a savings perspective, we're falling well short of where we need to be to make any inroads to our budget from that end. And one thing the government has done is they've said we're going to protect frontline workers. So nurses, teachers, and so on are unaffected, which we've never said that they were the cause of the problem. I would argue and say it's the 37 layers of management that sit there managing each other without any purpose is where the problem sits. Your view?
So let me get this straight. Another review. My mail says that the actual review itself cost $2 million to conduct. So paid to Helen Silver and various consultants that were involved, because we need to have consultants.
Yep.
But we're not going to accept all the recommendations and actually take them on board. We're going to sort of, maybe work around the edges and, see what minimal we can do to say that we're sort of making actions and swinging axes and all that. And I think the axe is maybe a little tomahawk at this point in time, and we're certainly not swinging a big axe, that's for sure. And I agree. Look, there's that much fat in that system, but you can't touch it. That has become the untouchable, and that's both at a state and federal level, as we saw in the last federal election.
Absolutely. And the thing that really annoys me there too, Marco, when you think about this, like within all this, you've got the cuts, and then you've also got the revenue increases as taxes or whatever they're doing from that point of view. All the new taxes that are being proposed, they're all going to be implemented post the election next year. So, so nothing's going to happen in the next 10 months. So the state's going to get worse and worse and worse. We're not going to make the cuts we need to make because, heaven forbid, these are the people who vote for us. We're not going to increase the taxes because these are the people that vote for us. So what do you think is going to happen next in January 2027, February 2027? It's going to be a debacle. And you're just sitting there, you're looking at these people and you're going, enough, for God's sake. It's one thing I'll say, the Victorian, and I do love this time of the year because the Victorian government feels like the Christmas present that keeps on giving. And they are very generous with their time in relation to stupidity. I'll give them that.
We're special. We are special here in Victoria. Although I had a couple of beautiful clients of ours that have, after 12 years, made their way back to Melbourne, and they came in to see us yesterday. And my first question was, why? Why did you go? What is wrong with you guys? Why did you bother coming back? I thought it was hilarious. They said, you're not the first person that said that to us, let me tell you.
Yeah. Oh, look, I'm hearing you, mate. I'm hearing you. Now, one last final thing, and just something out of the blue here. With all the requirements, with the banking requirements and government policies and so on, it looks like the banks are looking to exit out of lending to trusts. So the big four banks today are now talking about not lending to trusts from that. And it's not because trusts are riskier or whatever from that point of view. It's just the rigmarole and the requirements around a trust from a serviceability point of view. They're really battling with that. If we think about how people set up their affairs, if we're thinking how businesses are structured from that point of view, reducing the capacity for businesses to be able to lend through a particular structure is not going to be great or conducive to growth, is it?
Definitely not. And most businesses, most structures use trusts for asset protection reasons. And the reality is that there's another hurdle that goes in place for those enterprises, and probably feeds the private credit market, which, if anyone paid attention to ASIC's announcement a few weeks ago, that's an area that they're concerned about. But we are consistently, in this position where we find ways to make it difficult to do business. But the way that this has been done is unbelievable. So I know of a real case where there was a property settlement that was due to be done on a Monday, and the clients were told on the Friday, by the way, change of policy. I'm not going to name the bank. We no longer lend to trust because they were doing it through their trust. Sorry, can't help you. We're having to walk away from the deal with a settlement pending on the Monday. I reckon they're still paying the penalty interest right now as they're trying to find an alternative.
That is horrendous. And look, it is bizarre. Sometimes you got to be careful for what you wish for from that point of view. And I do wonder, in an environment where we sit back and we're saying we're trying to remove red tape, we're trying to remove bureaucracy, we're trying to make it easier to do business, we're actually making it harder and harder. And you do wonder where Australia ends up as a result with all this sort of stuff, because sometimes I don't think they think through the unintended consequence, and you end up, you end up in a bit of a jam, I dare say, from that perspective. Mate, it's 20 days till Christmas. Can you believe it?
You didn't need to tell me that. Yeah, so it is becoming a very hectic time of the year. Fortunately, we had our Christmas party 2 Saturdays ago now, which is good. We managed to do that before the real silly season's upon us. But becoming pretty hectic, and we close up. What is it on the evening of the 19th on the Friday? And it's going to be a very nice break, I reckon, because looking at the diaries and looking what's ahead for the next 20 days, it's going to be game on. Yeah, it is, and it has been game on for the last 40 to 60 days, in truth, mate. So it's been a great end to Christmas, or a great end to the year. In saying that, there's probably the first year, and I've been saying that to a couple of people. I reckon it's the first year that it feels like it's pre-COVID times, where just on the demand, just on the requirements to get things done, and just the level of work and so on, there's a great feeling about that. Whereas in the last couple of years before that, not that it was limp or soft, it just felt like that you kind of coasted into Christmas. Whereas this year you're feeling like, whoa, yeah, we're having to dive in big time. The one thing's for sure, Luke, that we do close the office on the 19th. And I reckon I get to 100% that there'll be 2 or 3 days after that, before Christmas, that I'll be bumping into you in a pair of shorts and a T-shirt in the office as we're knocking off the stuff that didn't get knocked off on time.
I'm hearing you, mate. I'm hearing you. But you know what? It's all part of the fun. We love what we do, and that's why we do it, mate. So there's never a stress. To all our wonderful staff, as always, thank you for all your wonderful work. You guys are awesome. We can't build what we build without you guys. To our wonderful clients, thank you for your support. Thank you for everything that you do. Have a wonderful weekend. We understand it's going to rain on Saturday, but I believe Sunday the sun will be out. So get out there, have some fun. 20 days before Christmas, make sure you buy a present for those nearest and dear. And if you're not buying presents, sit down, have a good book, maybe crack a beer and enjoy a glass of wine. Life's pretty good that way, I reckon.
Sounds like a plan to me.
No worries. All right, guys, you take care. Have a wonderful weekend. See you next week.
See you, folks.
Cheers.